What's going on, everybody? Red Zone Sports. We got Monday Night Showdown, and we are going to fire it up. So at first glance, a little bit weird slate, okay? And you would think that, this is going to be a bad slate or whatever. I actually think it's going to be a pretty good slate. I do think the Steelers are going to win. However, I think it's going to go over the total, really low total, in the mid-30s, depending on where you have the book. But, I definitely think that it's going to go over the total. So I built my inputs around that just so everybody knows. So, if you're looking at, I use Run the Sims, but if you're looking at, something different, and your numbers are coming up a little bit different, that's probably why. But I ran it on the basic inputs and just the standard inputs that the website has, and everything was kind of about the same, right? So we got last ownership update earlier this morning. It'll probably run again, closer. I would say I just checked the Discord. I think it'll run probably within the hour or so. If you're using Run the Sims, definitely check that for an update. But we're just going to kind of go off of what we got right now. So super interesting slate. Looking at ownership, it looks like Malik Neighbors is going to be the highest captain owned on the slate only at about 20% though. So kind of really spread out. Then we got Najee Harris at 16%, Daniel Jones at 15%, and then we've got Russ, Pickens, and Tyrone Tracy at about 10% projected ownership, and then a bunch of other randoms at, like Wandale at 5%, Jalen Warren at 2%, Freiermuth at 3%, Steelers D at 4%. Let's see, and that's about it for any meaningful ownership out there at the captain position. But yeah, I think that, I just a couple of things looking at it. I think Najee is way too high owned at the captain spot. I'm probably going to get to about 10% of him. The projections also kind of echo that, where we look at our leverage. So the leverage really, we've talked about it before. It's not an end all be all, but it's a good way to find out where you're going to get different and how it might help you against the field. So in this case, it takes a look at, everything that's currently owned versus what the simulations are spitting out. And for instance, a guy like Najee Harris, he's only coming up as the optimal captain about 10% of the time, and he's only showing up in the flex about 36% of the time, as to where the ownership projections have him in the flex about 47% and about 16% of captain. So he's pulling a huge negative leverage, as is the Steelers defense. Steelers defense only coming up in the optimal about 19% of the time, and they're capturing about 33% ownership. A guy who's massively our biggest leverage on the slate, and this is where what you look for to find out, like, okay, this is just huge. Chris Boswell is coming up in the optimal lineup 40% of the time, and even 3% at captain, and he's not being owned at captain and only being owned in the flex about 23% of the time. So most people, he's right in that 5 to like 54 range. More people are going to the Pittsburgh Steelers defense, which I can totally get on a night tonight. I'm always just going to lean towards the kicker on showdown slates personally. I just think it's a better option for someone to play. Some other decent leverage spots we'll talk about real quick. George Pickens, massive, about 7% captain leverage. He's only being owned about 10% of the time, but he's showing up 17% as the optimal captain. That's a big one. I think you got to get all over that. We mentioned Malik Neighbors. He's slightly under leveraged, but he's about what the projections are putting out right now. Darius Slayton, positive leverage. I don't really have a whole lot of interest in Darius Slayton. So here's one of those situations where, the positive leverage doesn't always tell you the story. I do like that Freiermuth is coming in with some positive leverage. also really low owned. So like 16%. And he's showing up in the optimal about 21% of the time. Only about a 2% captain, but I think he's a great play for tonight. Going down a little bit more, we got Theo Johnson at a positive 5%, only gaining about 6% ownership. Now, here's a guy that I think we need to spend some time to talk about a little bit, because everyone would rather play some of these cheaper wide receivers. I personally, Theo Johnson, like Darnell Washington, is more expensive than Theo Johnson. I think that is just a misprice. Like, now I'm fine with playing Darnell Washington. He's getting the targets when he's on the field. They're nothing spectacular, but Theo Johnson is playing and is out there a large percentage of the time. So I think it's just somewhere we kind of have to get to. Like, you've got to just force yourself to get there, right? So that's one thing where even if like last night I almost took down a GPP, I was duped with like 2 or 3 other people, but the difference was we had Brooks and then the winning lineup had Dalvin Cook. Okay, but Brooks had 0 points. If Brooks catches one pass for 30 yards, we win. Okay, it was like Dalvin Cook ended up having about 3.6, and we needed 3.61 or whatever it was to take it down. That was the difference in the 5 people that tied for first versus the 3 of us that tied for second. Okay, and that was the big difference. So like Theo Johnson, 2,400. You don't need to go like value hunting a lot down to these like Jalen Hyatt, Eric Gray, Daniel Bellinger. There's just no need to go down here for those guys. Theo Johnson, I think, is a legitimate option at 2,400. He's going to see about the same opportunities, I think, as like a Van Jefferson, but he's only 2,400. Honestly, if he gets me a 0, it's totally fine. I'm completely fine with that. If you don't want to play him, I think the Giants defense is a fine play to try and save some more salary. And then Darnell Washington. So Theo Johnson, Darnell Washington are probably the 2 lowest people I'm going to tonight. The top people on the slate, Malik Neighbors is the most expensive person. He's only at 10,000. So you don't have to go down and value hunt everywhere, right? Just because there's some of these guys that are, 200 that are going to be active. You can. Me personally, I don't play 150 lineups, so like that's not where I'm getting tonight, right? So let us talk about. So like I said, I have a lot of interest in George Pickens as my favorite. Probably going to be massively over the weight of the field. I'm just going to take kind of a stand, right? That'll be my stand tonight. And I would rather get to George Pickens than Najee Harris. I think Jalen Warren is interesting. I think he's just way too overpriced, which kind of sucks. Tyrone Tracy is just flat out mispriced. And if he is only going to be 23% owned at 4,400, I would much rather play him than a lot of those people down there, right? Both kickers, I think, are firmly in play for me. I don't know about. I think if you're going to play a quarterback in the captain spot, I would defer to Daniel Jones just because of the rushing upside that he can present. But I think it's going to be tough for him to get there tonight. Let me go take a look at the custom builds right now to see. Yeah, it's got a lot of Daniel Jones captain up top, Malik Neighbors, Chris Boswell in there. The 1.5s are interesting. I think if you're going to do, I think a 1.5 or a 2.4, either side is probably what's going to be most interesting to me tonight. I think some other interesting ways too, where if you think that, that if you're telling yourself that the Giants are just that terrible, like you could play 4 Giants and 2 Steelers, and you could be no problem with that, right? If you wanted to play both running backs, if you just think that they just try and pound the rock, that's fine. If you want to play like a running back and a kicker, I think that's okay too. But yeah, I just looking at it, I really, really like how the Pickens captains kind of look. They don't look like they're going to be overly duped. Where you can get Pickens, Boswell, Freiermuth, and Wilson, and then find your 2 I really like that kind of an option. Um, like I said, I don't know how much like guys like Calvin Austin and stuff like that I'm personally going to be getting to. Just don't think that there's a huge need for that. Um, guys like Michael Pruitt, like it's just you don't need to go there. I don't think Wan'Dale Robinson is interesting. Um, if you think I actually probably prefer Wan'Dale to Slayton just because of the price saving or um, just because he's in that weird range. It's not a price savings, but it's in a weird range of like 7,800 where like I don't think a lot of people are probably going to play him. He's coming in at 28% owned, but I find that hard to believe that he's actually going to be that owned. Jaylen Warren ownership really surprises me. I did not think that many people were going to be playing Jaylen Warren at 43%. But it looks like, just looking at the lineup construction, that I think that a lot of people are going to play Warren and Najee in the same lineup, which, looking at that, leads me to wanting to maybe get to some Russell Wilson captains. I don't know that a lot of people are going to go there. One of the most duped lineups or repeated lineups, the highest ownership is a Najee captain with Boswell, Jones, Warren, Malik, and then Tyrone Tracy. So you can see, that's where the Warren and Najee people, the sim really likes just smashing those two together. Which I get it, right? It's definitely a viable option. It's not something I would probably do. If I was going to do it, I definitely would play those guys at the captain, excuse me. I think if you're going to play, if you really have a stand you want to take on Warren, I think playing him at the captain is interesting. There's definitely some ways you can do it. I think if you're going to play like a 3-3, you really have to get quite a bit different with your lineup because a lot of people are going to get to that tonight just easily. I don't have a ton of interest in Darius Slayton tonight. I just don't. The games, when you look at the data, when Wan'Dale, and Neighbors are all active together, I just don't think that there's enough for him out there. It's just kind of hard to get to for me, right? But yeah, like I like a Russell Wilson captain. I like with 5 Steelers, and then you just pick one of your favorite. I mean, you could really play whoever you want to in that lineup. So you get to Daniel Jones, Malik Neighbors, whoever it might be, right? So that's kind of where we're at tonight. So just in summary, I think the defenses are obviously in play. If you wanted to get really weird and like a really large like single entry, I think if you play both defenses and both kickers and then just pick 2 people for outside of that, I think that's kind of a weird one, just kind of playing around with the lineups that you could do. Don't really suggest that, but that's a very outlier game script where in a really, really large tournament, those things sometimes work. Okay. I definitely don't think you should be afraid to play the Giants defense. They have a legitimate pass rush. Russell Wilson can do some weird things with the ball. We've seen some, Giants also have a decent special teams unit, so they, are susceptible to potentially blocking a kick, whatever it might be. Yeah, that's kind of like where I'm going tonight. I think it is a night where I am going to try at least one kicker captain, and I am going to try it with Boswell because I do think that the Steelers are going to win the game. I've got it put at about 20 to 27, 27-17. I'm sorry, 27-20 or 27-17, something like that. The Steelers win. I think it's going over the total. But just in summary, some of my favorite spots. Definitely love Pickens. I'm going to be way over the field. He's coming in at about 37%. I'm probably going to have 50 to 60% of Pickens tonight. Really like Freiermuth to catch a touchdown tonight. So I'm definitely going to be getting there. I was hoping that Jaylen Warren was going to be a little bit cheaper because I wanted to take, or a little bit lower owned because I wanted to take some more shots at him, but I'll probably be about even with the field at about 40%. Where I'm going to play Najee, I'll probably just play him in captain and just bank on the fact that he gets, the 2 to 3 touchdown night. I don't have a lot of interest in playing Najee in the flex at 9,200. I would rather just play Daniel Jones in that spot at 9,400 and then go down somewhere else. But yeah, Greg Joseph, get both the kickers in there. Definitely a big time kicker night. Down low, Theo Johnson and Darnell Washington are probably the two lowest guys that I'm going to. And then the other one you kind of have to take a look at too is Devin Singletary. We'll kind of close with this. Really highly priced up, 8,400. He's been splitting time basically with Tyrone Tracy, who's $4,000 less. But because of this pricing, it does present an opportunity for us at 5% ownership. Very rarely you're going to get somebody in the starting lineup that is going to play significant snaps at 5% ownership. Now, he lost the snap share battle to Tracy last game. See if that happens tonight. He's a much better. I think that Devin Singletary is a much better pass blocker. Tyrone Tracy's definitely getting better, which is why he's earned some more playing time. But against a very prolific rush for the Steelers, I think that Singletary might see some more snaps. The problem is, you got to expect probably like a floor of like 3 to 4 points from him. Right. So, but at 5% owned, it's definitely a conversation, whether it's for you or not. That's going to be up to you to decide. Hopefully everybody has a great night. Enjoy this slate and good luck. Thank you.